The Redmi Turbo 5 Max looks like the phone that POCO buyers should have received. It has a larger 9000 mAh battery, the same Dimensity 9500S performance, the same large 120Hz AMOLED display, and depending on the version you buy, even more RAM and storage. On paper, it feels like the better version of the POCO X8 Pro Max. But after using the Turbo 5 Max for 60 days, I think the real answer is more complicated. The hardware advantage is real, but it is also smaller than it looks. And the longer I use this phone, the more I realize that the biggest difference between the two has almost nothing to do with performance. It comes down to software, network compatibility, and how much effort you are willing to put into making a China ROM behave like a global phone. My name is Renzo, welcome to the channel, get some for interesting tech, and if you like either of these phones after the video, I have them linked below. Before we continue, let me quickly introduce the Halo Watch Hyper. What makes this watch interesting is that it covers the practical features you would actually use every day. It has a large 1.97-inch AMOLED display with adaptive brightness, so notifications, workout data, and maps remain easy to see whether you're indoors or outside. For outdoor activities, you get dual-band GPS for more reliable tracking, along with offline maps and route backtracking. That means you can navigate a downloaded route or retrace your path without constantly checking your phone. It also supports WhatsApp message replies directly from the watch and offers up to 18 days of battery life, so charging shouldn't become another daily task. Check out the Halo Watch Hyper through the link in the description and use my exclusive discount code HALOVIP to save on your purchase. Back to the video. Let us start with the obvious advantage of the Redmi Turbo 5 Max, which is the battery. You get 9000 mAh here compared with 8500 mAh on the POCO X8 Pro Max. The Turbo lasts longer, but we are only talking about an additional 500 mAh, or roughly 6% more capacity. When both phones can already comfortably last through a heavy day and potentially stretch into a second day, that extra capacity feels more like additional breathing room than a completely different experience. The Redmi still has the advantage, but I would not import the Turbo 5 Max only because of the battery, especially once you consider what the China ROM can do to standby trade and background activity. Google services on the Redmi Turbo 5 Max are optional. You can enable them, install the Play Store, download your usual apps, and at first glance, everything looks normal. Gmail, YouTube, Google Maps, and most other apps open and work. But being able to install Google services is not the same as having software designed around Google services from the beginning. China ROMs are notorious for aggressive background app management, and Google apps tend to be affected more than most. The clearest example for me has been Gmail. Time-sensitive notifications can arrive late, and sometimes they do not appear until I manually open the app. That happens even after allowing Gmail to run in the background, disabling battery restrictions, enabling auto start, and going through the usual settings that should keep an app active. Other apps that depend on background syncing can become less predictable too. A late promotional email does not matter, a delayed work email, client message, calendar reminder, or account security alert does. There is a workaround online involving a separate app that can force syncing more frequently. It can improve notification timing, but it requires extra setup and causes noticeable standby battery drain. That creates a strange situation. You are buying the Turbo 5 Max partly because it has the larger battery, then using more of that battery just to make notifications behave normally. At that point, the 500 mAh advantage starts losing its value. The POCO X8 Pro Max does not require this kind of effort. Google services are part of the global software experience. Gmail notifications arrive as expected, Google Photos can back up normally, and background syncing feels like something you can trust rather than something you need to keep checking. The same difference extends to other Google ecosystem features. The POCO X8 Pro Max officially supports Android Auto, Quick Share, Circle to Search, Link to Windows, and other globally targeted features. You can link your accounts, and they generally work the way you expect. With the Turbo 5 Max, some Google features may work. Some may require extra steps, and others may not have the same system-level integration. Android Auto is one of the more important examples. On a global phone, it is built into the expected Android experience. On a China ROM, you should not assume that installing an application will give you the same plug-and-play result. The AI experience is also different. The POCO X8 Pro Max is designed around the global version of HyperOS. It includes tools such as Circle to Search, AI writing, AI speech recognition, AI search, and translation features intended for international users. Availability can still depend on language and region, but the software is built around services that make sense outside China. The Turbo 5 Max has its own AI features and may receive certain Xiaomi features earlier, but many of them are designed for the Chinese market. Some functions are tied to Chinese language support, Chinese services, or apps that most users for the rest of the world will never use. So the China ROM is not necessarily less capable. It is simply optimized for a different user. If you live in China and use the local ecosystem, the Turbo may provide a more complete experience. But for the rest of us, a feature is only useful when it works with the services you actually use. Now, the POCO also has an eSIM advantage. The X8 Pro Max officially supports either 2 physical nano SIMs or 1 physical SIM paired with an eSIM, depending on regional and carrier support. My Turbo 5 Max is limited to physical SIM use. It becomes especially useful when traveling because you can keep your local SIM active while adding a temporary data plan. Network compatibility is another area where you need to be careful. In my use here in the Philippines, I could not take advantage of 5G on the Redmi Turbo 5 Max using my Globe prepaid network. The phone's listed band suggests that some necessary Philippine frequencies may be present, so I am not going to say 5G is technically impossible on every carrier or in every location. But my real experience is that it never connected to 5G the way a locally supported global phone normally would. That could come down to carrier provisioning, certifications, software, or coverage. Whatever the reason, it remained on 4G or LTE. The good news is that LTE worked pretty well. Calls, messages, and mobile data were reliable on Globe Prepaid. And to be fair, 4G is still king in the Philippines when it comes to coverage and consistency. A stable LTE connection is often more useful than a 5G signal that only appears in certain locations or constantly switches back and forth. Still, if you are buying a high-performance phone in 2026, reliable 5G support is something you should reasonably expect. The POCO X8 Pro Max has broader global band support and software intended for international carriers. That does not guarantee perfect 5G everywhere, but it gives you a better chance of proper compatibility, especially when moving between local network services or traveling abroad. It can also matter for carrier aggregation, voice over LTE, and Wi-Fi calling. Now, the Redmi does have another hardware advantage, and that is the range of memory and storage options. The global POCO X8 Pro Max is offered with 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage or half a terabyte of storage. The Turbo 5 Max is available in additional configurations, including 16GB of RAM and up to 1TB of storage. For large games, offline media, video, or emulators, 1TB is generally useful. Neither phone has a micro SD card slot, so choosing enough internal storage matters. The extra RAM is less important for most people. 12GB is already more than enough for everyday use and gaming. And there is something slightly ironic about buying the 16GB Turbo version when the China ROM can still aggressively close applications in the background. More RAM does not automatically mean better multitasking if the software decides an application should not remain active. But software updates are another area where the two phones can feel different. China ROM devices sometimes receive Xiaomi features earlier, but those updates are developed for China first, so many additions may focus on apps, integrations, or language features that offer little value here. The POCO's global updates may arrive on a different schedule, but they are more relevant to Google services, international networks, global app compatibility, and the features most users outside China depend on. I would rather receive a slightly later update that works properly with my daily apps than an earlier update filled with features I cannot fully use. And before someone says you can simply install a global ROM on the Turbo 5 Max, that is not a simple solution for most buyers. Flashing firmware can involve unlocking the bootloader, finding compatible software, and accepting the risk of failed updates. Xiaomi has also made bootloader unlocking more restrictive on Chinese market devices. Even if a seller offers a so-called global ROM, that does not always mean you are getting an official global version. It may be modified firmware, an unlocked device, or software that no longer receives normal over-the-air updates. This can create problems with Google Play integrity, banking apps, Google Wallet, and other services that check whether the device software has been modified. To be clear, Banking apps and Google Wallet do not automatically fail on every stock Turbo 5 Max. Several financial apps may work perfectly well on the original China ROM with Google services installed. The concern is predictability. An app that works today could have behaved differently after an update or a change in the back's requirements, especially with an unlocked bootloader or unofficial firmware. With the POCO, there is less uncertainty. You are using the global software the device was intended to run, with native Google integration and official regional support. There is one more small distinction worth mentioning, and that is water resistance. The POCO X8 Pro Max is officially marketed globally with an IP68 rating. The Redmi Turbo 5 Max is marketed in China with broader dust and water resistance claims. That gives the Turbo a slight advantage on paper, but I would not make a buying decision around it. Both phones should handle accidental splashes and normal exposure better than older mid-range phones, but neither should be treated like an underwater camera. After 60 days, here is how I see the comparison. The Redmi Turbo 5 Max wins the specification sheet. It gives you the 9000 mAh battery, more memory and storage options, and slightly stronger durability claims while keeping nearly all the core hardware that makes the POCO X8 Pro Max appealing. Performance, the display, and battery life are all excellent. But a phone is not only hardware. Once I started relying on it for work emails, notifications, mobile data, Google services, and everything else that happens outside the benchmark, the China ROM became the most important part of the experience. The delayed notifications are not something I want to keep troubleshooting. The lack of reliable 5G on my network is not ideal, and I do not want to install a workaround that increases standby drain just to recover basic functionality. So is the Redmi Turbo 5 Max better than the POCO X8 Pro Max? For a very specific user, yes. If you understand China ROMs, do not depend heavily on time-sensitive Google notifications, are satisfied with LTE, and want up to 16GB of RAM or 1TB of storage, the Turbo 5 Max gives you more hardware for your money. But for most users in the Philippines, I would choose the POCO X8 Pro Max. You will lose 500 mAh of battery capacity, but you gain a phone that requires much less effort. Google services work the way they should. Android Auto and global features are properly supported. Network compatibility is broader. eSIM is available. And the overall software is designed for the region where you are actually using the phone. The Turbo 5 Max is the more impressive phone on paper. The POCO X8 Pro Max is the better phone to live with. Give it a try, the links are below. But that's it for this one. Drop a sub or like if you like supporting the channel. And as always, until the next one, stay safe.